A world powered by the blockchain is being formed right in front of our eyes. Experts are calling it the Internet 3.0, the next digital revolution. It's leaving many investors and even institutions looking for a path to take an early position in this massive opportunity. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Dash, it's all speculation at this point. But what is certain is that the most profitable businesses for cryptocurrency and the blockchain is in the actual creation of these coins. This is why some of the top early adopters of Bitcoin, blockchain miners, fund managers, and even billionaires have come together to create a new vehicle to invest in the blockchain core itself. Get immediate access to this new company by going to crushthestreet.com/Bitcoin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I got a new guest on the line. Got a lot of new guests here lately. Manuel Stagars, and he is someone who created a documentary, which I watched my flight from Los Angeles to Austin, and it's called The Blockchain and Us. And it's got over a couple 100,000 views. It focuses on blockchain, where we are, where we've been, and it's a great documentary for people who've been in it for a while or who are just learning about cryptocurrencies. And we're going to get some insight today. Manuel, thanks for coming on the line with me today.
Sure. Thanks, Kenneth, for having me.
Your website is manuelstagars.com if people want to look and to see some of your work. But Manuel, tell us, how did you get into Bitcoin and what made you produce the blockchain and us?
First off, I'm not necessarily into Bitcoin. It's the film's about the applications of blockchain technology and potentially disruptive applications of blockchain technology. And I didn't necessarily want to focus on Bitcoin per se, because there's already so many documentaries and films and accounts of the rise of Bitcoin and what it is and explainers and whatnot. And I thought it would be more interesting to explore the phenomenon, of these disruptive technologies or potentially disruptive technologies, and why people get behind it and why they think it's changing the world and all these grand visions. And how I got into focusing on blockchain was through a film I made in 2016 about fintech. And for that film, I spoke with a lot of people in the banking sector, in politics, regulation, but also in basically people who had startups, who were challenging banks with new services. And there I found that those people who had a focus on blockchain applications were usually the more interesting interviews. Those were the people who had ambitions to change the world and break the system as it was, and challenge the banks and take all their business away and all that. And that was more interesting than those startups in the fintech space that were just automating something that they were hoping to sell to banks. And so I found that these opinions, of those people who were working with blockchain technology somewhat were a little bit at odds with what fintech was all about in 2016. So I decided to make a separate film just about blockchain technology and the applications and what people thought about it in early 2017. So that's how The Blockchain and Us came about.
When a term gets used too much, people sometimes get tired of the connotation, and they start a different word. They start using a different word. For instance, it's not common to call someone who works to maintain a building and clean toilets and vacuum a janitor anymore. People now use custodian because they don't like that word, or we don't use the word maid anymore because it's now antiquated. And one of my guests this week started talking about, we talked about cryptocurrencies, but he doesn't like using that word anymore. He calls it digital assets because he's saying it's more than just money. And he's, didn't like what digital currencies has become, and to define every single one of the technologies that are coming online. And I think this is very much in line with what you're talking about here. Obviously, it did start off like that. Bitcoin was supposed to be a form of money, a wealth storage, but the blockchain is using the applications for it are so many more things, data storage and title and registering things. It's so vast. But yeah, just give us some ideas on what you think the blockchain is going to be used for and the direction it's going.
Well, first off, I made the blockchain dust at the beginning of 2017, and I made about 20 interviews, with people from insurance, with people in working in finance, working in identity. And also some of them working with cryptocurrencies, working with Bitcoin or with Ethereum. And of course, a lot has changed since I made those interviews. And it's often a criticism also that I hear, when people see the blockchain and us today, they say like, hey, you didn't focus on ICOs, or you were overly positive, and you didn't raise any concerns or any questions about fraud and that. And that's definitely true, because it's just what I encountered at the beginning of the year. There was this big enthusiasm of, big corporations getting behind blockchain technology. I mean, you had all these consulting companies, these big four firms, they had all their blockchain labs. The banks were rolling out their blockchain labs and blockchain pilots and blockchain accelerators and whatnot. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm about, the potential of the technology to change everything. And some of the views I think that I got were maybe a little bit too optimistic now in hindsight, where many people thought, hey, this is going to do everything, and we'll have, instead of spreadsheets and instead of databases, we'll have everything on the blockchain, or on in general distributed ledgers, and all that. So I think, to be honest, I think I'm not quite sure whether all these opinions that people expressed are still absolutely holding true today. So when you say the cryptocurrencies have somewhat moved, from being currencies to being digital assets, I mean, what does that exactly mean? It's just, what I found is that some of the people I spoke with back then, they expressed one opinion back then, and today, I mean, I'm actually working on a sequel now to the blockchain and Dust that I'll shoot in early 2018, and so I'm in pre-production now. So I contacted some of the people I spoke with, and some of them changed their views quite a bit, and also found that maybe some things aren't as easy as they were hoping. I mean, one thing I definitely encountered was, especially, people in the corporate space who were working with blockchain technologies, found it very hard, to get past a certain point that they reached with blockchain in their firm, where at the beginning it was very cool that they, got behind blockchain and made this had like a cool new image and brought some fresh air into, the communications of this bank or of this consulting firm. But now they find it's somewhat hard to back up some of the ideas maybe that they had, but also to get funding to keep it going and to expand it. So I'm always a little critical, when people say like, oh yeah, this is absolutely always going up and up and up. And also I think, some of the views on what blockchain can do and should do and also cannot do have maybe changed and are still changing very quickly.
Give anyone the wrong impression here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, I feel like we've lumped every single cryptocurrency into one, like they're all Bitcoin, or they're all competition for Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin is going to hold up long term. I think it will be a wealth storage vehicle and do what it does. It's proven itself. It has a longest history relative to all the other cryptocurrencies. And I think it's very, very powerful. It's a very revolutionary, powerful thing. But because of that, and I think we look at sites like coinmarketcap.com and we think they're all the same. But in reality is they are serving so many different purposes. One company might be doing something for data storage, and another one might be using another application for something completely different. And I think we're confusing and mixing them when they're in their own lane. Something completely different, and not necessarily something you want to put your money in because you're going to speculate. But the fact is you can invest in Amazon, or you can use the service, and you can be an investor in Amazon and never use the service, or actually have mail delivered to your house every single day with Amazon and never buy the stock. And that's the difference. And I think that's where we're getting in some of these ICOs. And I think with it takes some redefining and some new thinking about where the technology is going in some of these new ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, somebody I spoke with in San Francisco recently about applications of blockchain and of tokens in general. He said tokens are like an API. And if you think about it, what you just said, you can profit from Amazon in many ways. You can buy the stock. You can buy a bond, you can buy something cheaper maybe than somewhere else on Amazon, or you can sell something. You can have a whole trading business. So there's a lot of interaction with Amazon on the platform that Amazon provides. And if you think of these tokens, that are sold off in ICOs as access to APIs, then I think that's quite an interesting view. And so then all of a sudden everything is possible, right? I mean, every interaction with a digital service could happen through, you can call it a cryptocurrency or a token or an application of blockchain. And then I think, we're getting into very interesting but also uncharted territory. For example, I made this film, right? And a lot of people contact me about promoting this firm or this service or this ICO. I mean, every other day I get an invite, to push some kind of ICO somewhere on my channel, or to invest in it or buy it, and all of that. And I think, it's very inflationary, all these ICOs. And also when I speak with consultants, there's just quite a few firms in London who are specialized in packaging ICOs and helping these companies, with their advertising and marketing, and even those companies, who you would think would be all for it and all behind it and hope to profit as much as possible from this boom. They say most of the companies who come to them, don't have a product. They just see an ICO as the hot thing to raise funds, and they may have access, to a big network of wealthy people who are able to buy something from them to give them funds. But the product and the application of what the token will do at the end is not that clear. So sometimes, it's like putting the cart before the horse. You try to raise money as quickly as possible, and then figure out what you're going to do. And with a lot of the ICOs, I think, that may happen. I mean, that's the impression I'm getting, because I get so many white papers, and I don't even read them anymore. I mean, because it's just so hard to comprehend what they even want to do and will do. And I doubt all of them have really worthwhile applications.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So do you think we're getting to the end of this ICO bubble where funds are drying up for a lot of these companies, and kind of when we get to the end, kind of climbing up that mountain, are we getting to that point where the cart just kind of trickles back down and falls?
Well, I don't know. At the end of the day, you have to deliver, right? I mean, I started quite a few startups, and I also I was in contact with VCs and venture capital and angels for my own companies. And sooner or later, you have to deliver something. I mean, you have to deliver a product or, just some results. I mean, apart from being profitable, I mean, you just have to, at some point, follow up your promises with a real product. And And I don't know if all of these companies raising all this money can actually have, a worthwhile product in the market. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on what the ICO market and the cryptocurrency market is doing, but sooner or later, we'll have to put all these ideas to the test and see what they can actually do and whether they can come up with a useful product. It's not just in ICOs. I think whenever there's access to easy money, you get a lot of bubbles, and you see it in startups as well. I mean, having a startup right now is very cool and is absolutely a trend. I mean, when I started my first company in 1996, I mean, it was totally uncool to have a startup. I mean, everybody thought I was out of my mind. Why do you do that? You could just go and work at a big company, get much more money, and it's too much work. You don't have enough capital. But now it's totally different, right? It's the opposite. People want to make startups, but they're not aware of the fact that you actually have to deliver a lot, and you can't just, you can only be cool for so long, right? And you can only ride the hype and ride the wave of the market sentiment for so long, but then sooner or later, you'll have to deliver a product, and the market has to test that product and say if they want it or not.
Manuel, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is just really what has fascinated you about cryptocurrencies, and what have you learned? And I know you're very passionate about this. Talk to us more about the future of digital currencies, digital assets, a blockchain.
Yeah, it's the blockchain in us it's not really explaining much, right? I mean, it's not explaining how the blockchain works. It's not explaining how cryptocurrencies work, or it's not, giving an account of what's happening with Bitcoin. But what I found was really interesting in the technology was that all of a sudden people, right, they have tools in their hands that allows them to do almost anything, right? And also that's what I found in the interviews that I made. People had a huge empowerment all of a sudden to kind of change the world, right, how they put it. And so I think that's really fascinating, and that kind of goes beyond just blockchain technology or beyond cryptocurrencies. I mean, it applies to technology in general. I think that now there are tools out there where almost everybody who can code or who just has a big idea to do something can actually do it and can deploy it at scale. I mean, like Bitcoin, right? I mean, who would have thought that a private person who doesn't even say who he actually is can create a new currency that is all of a sudden worth billions of dollars, right? And challenges established currencies. The same with things like Ethereum, right? Who would have thought that all of a sudden you can potentially do things on the blockchain that automate a lot of the contracts that before, trusted third parties were necessary for example, registers of all kinds, government-controlled functions. And what I think is just really fascinating is this empowerment, that's happening. And I see this in many domains of life today, that people really feel they can do something worthwhile with their talents, and also something that matters in the world. And so that's really something I'd like to explore more in my films, and just in general. I think it's just something that I find is absolutely fascinating.
So Manuel, I guess my final question is, what are some of the most exciting blockchain applications that you see? I know you've questioned some, and you're kind of taken a more level-headed approach to where this is all going. But what are some of the most exciting and dynamic potential avenues that we can see blockchain technologies go down?
I mean, again, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, to answer this question. I mean, I said before, in other interviews, I think what's quite promising is the whole question of identity, because that's a big issue. You know, even for people, right? It's not that easy to actually determine people are who they say they are on the internet. And if there is a way to have a more secure way of identifying people, I think that's potentially very, very big, a big change, and a big change for the better. And also then, once you have that issue solved, you know, then you have the Internet of Things, which is currently somewhat unsafe, maybe. You know, I mean, there's always these stories of cameras turning into botnets and all that. And I think once you have a better identification of all these devices and things that are on the internet, with potentially, you know, a blockchain application that is secure and cannot be changed so easily, then I think that's a very, very big thing to have. So that's personally, you know, just one application I'm quite looking forward to, you know, when it arrives. But there certainly may be many other ones that I'm not even aware of. I mean, like I said, you know, I just started pre-production of the sequel to the film, and the way I approach this, I usually just see who is having kind of a voice in the market, and then I approach these people, and it goes like dominoes, you know, from one it leads to the next, and it's also a process of discovery, right? It's exploring what's actually happening. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm sure once I'm deeper down that research path, I have probably better overview also of what's currently going on and what the state of the art of the technology is.
Powerful. Well, it's guys like you that are out there researching, learning, and staying in front of the trends. So, Manuel, thanks for coming on Crush the Street today. If people want to learn more about you and your work and the where they can find your documentaries, please share that with everyone today.
Sure. I mean, the website of the blockchain and us is blockchain-documentary.com. So there you can see the film. You can also see all the interviews, all the 20 interviews that I made for the film. You can see them in full length, because the film itself is 30 minutes only, and each interview is between 15 and 45 minutes. So you can actually really see what people in early 2017 thought about the potential of blockchain by really diving into these interviews. If you want, you can do all of that on the website. But again, you know, you can also see the film, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, it was a great documentary, and I recommend everyone to go check it out. And I look forward to any new information that you do put out, Manuel. So thanks for coming on Crush the Street.
Sure. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.